us. So, onto the show. Our guest today is Raymond Whitehead, who is the founder of Direct Democracy Ireland, a brand new way of looking at politics in Ireland. And of course, many of you will know that the Republic of Ireland has been going through an extremely difficult time, both economically and otherwise, over the last number of years. And something radical needs to be done to address the issues that currently exist there. So I'm looking forward to this chat. Raymond, how are things?
Yeah, very well. Thank you, John. Pleasure to be on your programme.
Well, I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion about the state of politics in Ireland and beyond and some of the potential solutions. Before we do that, tell us a little bit about your own background and I suppose, as I ask most guests on the show, how you got from where you were to where you are now.
That's a good question. I started out as a teacher of Transcendental Meditation. I actually started out as an athlete who was looking for scholarship to America, and our coach got us, this is kind of a long-winded version, but our coach had everybody in the club meditating because he felt it was very good for our athletics. I found it so impressive what it did to my athletics, because I was training incredibly hard, that instead of going on scholarship, I decided to go to Switzerland. Now, Switzerland is a direct democracy. And when I was there, I had a Swiss girlfriend at the time, and she explained to me what the system was, because, I saw people every now and again in the street with a little table and some forms on them, and it seemed a little out of character with Switzerland, given that the Swiss are very orderly and all that. Now, I wonder what these people were doing, sort of standing on street corners with tables. And it turned out they were collecting signatures. And they were for, when they got enough signatures, to call local referendum. They could also do this for to call it national referendum as well. And I found that kind of fascinating. But I found Switzerland generally fascinating because, as a direct democracy, there was a palpable sense, and it was really quite, when you lived there for a little while, and I lived in the small towns and villages where it's more noticeable, there was a palpable sense of ownership of the ordinary person in the street, of their town, of their village, of their street. This is my street, this is my town, this is my village. And you really felt it there. And every town and village you went to was beautiful. It was spotlessly clean, well, managed, and, everything was very orderly, and people just went about their business, and the country worked. Everything worked, and it worked so well that I missed so many trains and buses and boats going across lakes, because I couldn't believe that everything went on time. If it said the bus was going at 11 o'clock, it went at 11 on the dot. And I had worked actually for CIE before I went to Switzerland, and nothing went on time. And I knew it because I worked for them. And I just couldn't get it into my head while I was there that things actually worked. And when they said 11 o'clock, they meant 11 o'clock. When they went 12 o'clock, it was 12. And if you turned up at 30 seconds past 12, you saw the bus going down the street. So this kind of fascinated me. The whole thing worked like a well-oiled Swiss watch. And it stuck in my head, for decades afterwards. And it was when everything went belly up in Ireland that I started to question how we got here. And I, like so many people in this country, I felt helpless. And I felt I had no voice. I actually had contacted and written to made proposals to some ministers, which I thought were very worthwhile proposals. And I was completely ignored. I didn't even get a thank you for your suggestion. One of them was to clean up the air in Ireland and eliminate pollution from all motor vehicles in the country as a result of something I put on my car, which did exactly that, got rid of all the pollution. And I was just ignored. And I just felt so frustrated and annoyed and angry. And then the proverbial hit the fan. And I just thought, and you have this sense of apathy and no control ultimately over your life or your town or your country, or no input. And I thought back on my experience in Switzerland and the power that the ordinary person had there to influence change in their country. And if enough people agreed with you and they cut through all the bureaucracy, all the tribunals, all this kind of thing. They just went straight to the core of the problem and went, we want that changed, get on with it, to the government. And the government had to do it because the people had spoken. And it's the people's country. And I thought, jeepers, this is, I have to go back and have a look at this again. So I went back and I looked at it and discovered that we actually had this under our first constitution. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. I thought, my God, what happened? And what happened was the first government that got in took it out of our constitution. The founding fathers of the Irish Free State gave this power of referendum to the Irish people because we'd come out of a colonial system of dictatorship type of system for 800 years, and they wanted to give this power to the people to have a voice and a say in their own future and the ongoing administration of their country. And the first government, you wonder why, because in the 4 years that had passed between the first government being elected and or 5 years, whatever it was, and the time that they took it out of the constitution, the people had never actually exercised this right because they were happy to let the government get on with what they were doing. They didn't step in there and call for referendums every second day of the week. So it had never been exercised. But the politicians took it out. And they did it in a very devious way, if you don't mind me sort of giving the history of it. They did it in a very devious way. What they did was, Article 50 of our Constitution was a weak point. It allowed the government to make amendments to the Constitution, not changes, but amendments. And what they did was, under the Constitution, any change that they made to the Constitution had to be put to the people within 2 years of that change being made. So what they did was, they took it out of the Constitution, the Articles 47 and 48, which gave the people this voice and this power, and they extended, they didn't change the period that they had to, or not the period, but they didn't change that right that they had to put it to the people within 2 years. They just extended the period. They amended and they extended that 2 year period to 8 years.
Okay.
And putting off the right of the people, or their need to put it to the people for 8 years. And at the end of that 8 years, they extended it by another 8 years, effectively denying the people of Ireland their right to call, to have a referendum on whether they could do this, take it out of the Constitution or not. So it was put on hold indefinitely. In the meantime, the right of referendum was taken out of the Constitution in the meantime. So at the time, there was just short of 100,000 signatures got against what they were doing. Now, when you think of an age when there was no internet, no mobile phones, virtually no ordinary telephones, the average person had no access to this kind of communication, that 100,000 signatures could be got against what they were doing, in such a short period of time, phenomenal. But they were ignored because the excuse the government gave was, no, we're not denying you your right to call a referendum on what we've just done. We're just putting it off for 8 years. And of course, at the end of that 8 years, they extended it by another 8 years. Now, in the meantime, what happened was after that 8 years, there was... we got our freedom from the Brits, and De Valera, who, and I'm open to correction on this, but he was against this article being taken out of the Constitution, the 47 and 48, in drawing up the new Constitution, our second Constitution, the one we have today. He inserted into that Constitution, when he saw the power it gave the politicians, that the government retained the right of referendum. It wasn't put in. That more or less what they said. The government in the new constitution keep the right of referendum. Now, they never had it to keep in the first place because we never got to vote on it. But having said that, everybody voted in favour of it because, getting our freedom from the Brits and party time when we have our own new constitution, and trust me, I'm a politician, or I was a freedom fighter for Ireland back in 1916. Everybody just signed off on it. And it had been forgotten what the details, and buried in the details, and like the Lisbon Treaty, I think nobody actually read the fine print. It was passed and into the new constitution. So now we've been stuck with it ever since. We can't call referendum. The only possibility for the people calling a referendum, in a sense, is through the Seanad. If the Seanad don't like something or want to propose a new bill or something, if they get a third of the Seanad and or 50%, I think, of the Seanad, and maybe a third of elected politicians, including independents and opposition, and maybe one or two rogue government politicians, they can propose to put this to the president, and then the president can then insist on a referendum being called. It's very convoluted way of going about it, not so direct, but that's the only way that referendum can be called outside of the government calling them. Now, the government kept the power of referendum for themselves. When they took it away from the people, they gave the power of referendum to themselves, because they saw the power that being able to call a referendum has.
But Raymond, just interject there for a second.
Yeah.
Isn't that okay? Because let's face it, back when the state was being founded, the politicians were really only trying to find their feet. They were looking for what was best for the people. And ever since then, we've had a free democracy, and we get to elect our own politicians who, let's face it, they're the ones doing the right thing for us all the time. So isn't everything rosy in the garden? What's the problem?
Well, look around you. Is everything rosy in the garden? It's not. And we see a long list, longer than the length of your arm there, of corruption and all kinds of things that are not right, that the people would like to see be able to hold these people who have shown themselves to be corrupt over the years to account, and we can't. And they go about with diplomatic immunity virtually to so many abuses of power, and we have no voice, and we need that voice back in order to be able to conduct our business in an open and transparent way, which it isn't done at the moment. You see the things that are being uncovered now, and the skullduggery that's going on in relation to it. You've only got to look at what's got in the news today and yesterday and for the last week, to see the level of corruption, skullduggery, and secrecy, and all of these things, which, when you have the people have the power to hold these politicians accountable, you don't get so much, because they're very aware of the fact that the people being partners through direct democracy in the political process, they are the partners, and they can call referendum, they can hold them to account. So they tend to be very aware of public opinion when they make decisions, and not just ride roughshod over the populace, in the name of supposedly doing the right thing by the people. But by the time we discover all the problems that these things have brought about, when we objected in the first place, it's too late. We're way down the road of being able to turn back a lot of the time. And the politicians won't turn back because they don't like admitting they're wrong anyway, So we have a real problem here with representative democracy. We need to make the politicians hold them accountable. We need to make sure that everything is open and transparent, and that's what direct democracy does.
And to look at direct democracy then, and the way that it actually works, it's the case that pretty much anyone can call a referendum on any topic, provided they get the backing or the signatures or whatever it might be of a certain number of people. Is that similar to the system that we see in Iceland now at the moment, since their pots and pans revolution?
It is, and the growing awareness of the need for people to be engaged and have a mechanism whereby they have a voice, and they're not just dictated to by the people that they've elected, is growing around the world and around Europe. And we're seeing the rise of the need for direct democracy, and you see it even in the Ukraine at the moment. The people crying out for having to be listened to as a people. So it's growing all over the world. Iceland has been the more recent one to take this up, and there are growing movements all over Europe calling for direct democracy. In Spain, there was a movement there. down a little bit recently, but calling democracy, very similar to the idea of direct democracy. So there is a growing awareness, and as you know, probably, possibly, that in the Meath East by-election, for instance, Direct Democracy Ireland, the party I set up to promote direct democracy here, came very close to winning that election. And we actually came fourth overall, and if it had been a national election, we would actually have won a seat, but there was only one seat going, so that was won by Helen McEntee.
And I think the interesting point to note about that, because I followed that campaign very, very closely, and apart from the fact that there would have been a seat there in a national election, for a new party to run a relatively unknown, or politically a complete unknown candidate, and to do so well with the opposition of what amounted to essentially a media blackout and a media smear campaign against that candidate, to my mind, was nothing short of staggering. What can you tell us about that and the way the Irish media has reacted to the apparent popularity now in such a short space of time to Direct Democracy Ireland, and the challenge that presents to the establishment?
Well, first of all, they reacted in kind of shock, I suppose. And Ben Gilroy, who ran for Direct Democracy Ireland, was on primetime the next night, and they kept calling him an independent candidate. How the national media don't have access to the electoral records and stuff is beyond me. But they almost refused to refer to him as the political party, and kept calling him an independent candidate, and had to be corrected on numerous occasions. But following that, there has been, they couldn't ignore us on that initial result. But following on from that, there was a kind of an almost close down of on the national media, very little coverage, and in fact, as you said, there was even a smear campaign conducted on prime time, which totally misrepresented Ben Gilroy and was actually manipulated in such a way as to try to make him out to be some sort of con man or whatever. And this is so absurd that even journalists that RTE had to really surpass themselves in their bias, and their manipulation of the truth, and had lost a lot of credibility among journalists themselves. So this is I don't know what it takes to get a balanced coverage on the national media here, but we keep trying and we keep working on it.
And I do think there are green shoots of hope there because of the alternative media and the rise of the internet, and so many people sourcing their news from non-mainstream sources now. And by that, I don't necessarily mean conspiracy theory websites or anything like that. I mean just people not tuning into the state broadcaster RTE in Ireland in the way that they did in the past, be it through radio or TV. And people are becoming a little bit more open to alternative information as a result, because when you see a party that finishes fourth in a by-election such as Direct Democracy Ireland did, and more attention been given to a party such as the Green Party, which essentially imploded in the last general election and practically doesn't exist anymore, yet they'll continue to get airtime and constant media exposure. But thankfully people are looking elsewhere for their information. And how key do you see the internet and alternative media as being to the message that you're trying to get out, Raymond?
Well, it's very important because it's the one place where information can be circulated more freely, and we have a reasonably good media presence on Facebook and things like that, and people can find us, and we have our own website, of course, and all of that. So it's very important, and it engages people in discussion, and it provides a more open and balanced forum for sharing information and getting information. So we're working on that leading up to the local elections and the European elections as well.
Great. And just to get back then to the way that the direct democracy system runs, because something that pops into my head quite a lot is, if we get more power to essentially govern ourselves and decide what issues need to go to the people with a referendum, surely any kind of crackpot can decide. For example, if I decide that I want to have all the roads repainted in luminous green in the morning, if I go out and get enough signatures, that can go to the vote, and that's surely a waste of resources and people's time.
Yeah, and I would say great, and good luck with that. I mean, how many? If you need 50,000 signatures, I don't think there's that many 50,000 crazy people in Ireland, you know. And it's a kind of a self-regulating system. I mean, if you want everybody in Ireland to wear pink shoes, I'd say, yeah, great, go out and see how many signatures you can get for that. Wonderful. Good luck to you, you know. It's self-regulating. Most people, the average person, is not that stupid. And even if you got enough signatures to bring it to a referendum that everybody in Ireland wears pink shoes, let's face it, the people of Ireland aren't that stupid, you know. And generally speaking, you know, the average person is a pretty well-balanced, you know, hard-working, honest individual, you know, and it's just a self-regulating thing. Unless everybody in the country is a nutcase, you're not going to get those kind of things getting too far. You know, they won't go anywhere, and even if they do, it will be discussed. You will have that opportunity to do it if you're crazy enough, or if you're whatever clever enough to come up with something that you think needs discussion. Then good luck to you, and we need to have that. This is what democracy is about, you know, and being able to talk about these things in a balanced and, you know, to be able to look at the pros and cons of something when it gets to a certain stage is very important. I mean, we had an AGM recently in which there was a point brought up, and there was a number of people against it, for instance, in the room. And by the end of our discussion, some of those people had changed their mind, and they were quite adamant about their position on that topic. But by the end of it, because of the arguments that had been put forward, they actually decided that they were wrong, and they joined the other side, if you like. You know, so open and frank discussions are very important in this process. Not just that a decision is made and that's the end of it. Leading up to it, there needs to be open and honest and frank discussions on the whole thing. And, you know, the direct democracy means that the people are partners in the political process. And when you're a partner in the process, you talk things out. You discuss them. You go through the pros and cons, you know, and you may change your mind as a result of that. So it's a most sane and balanced system, you know, and it's really a very rational system. So nothing gets pushed on any.
And that makes a lot of sense as well, Raymond, because
it does.
I think we tend to reap what we sow, but quite often as political bystanders, because essentially, bar the general election every number of years, we are bystanders when it comes to any kind of active role in politics in the country. It is left to that group of people who we elect, and it doesn't matter. I mean, essentially we have to listen to promises and lies at election time every 4 or 5 years, and then nobody seems to be accountable when they break those promises and are shown to be lying. Whereas what direct democracy seems to do, and this is my understanding of it from what you're saying, is that it places people actually in the debate. So as opposed to just spectating from the sidelines and complaining to their neighbour that things aren't going the way they are, or celebrating if they do go, they can actually have an active role in it. And if people feel that something is not going the way they want it to go, they can actually change that. It's real change as opposed to Barack Obama style lip service change.
Yeah, yes, no, exactly. And you know, being a spectator at your own demise, if you like, or whatever, is not a very happy state of affairs. And that's what we are. We're just spectators, while the people who have the real power, you know, get on to the business of telling us how our lives are going to be run. And nobody, you know, people like to be engaged. They want to be engaged. And it's total frustration and apathy when you're not, you don't have an input into something that's going to affect your life profoundly. And this is because people are motivated and they feel in control of their lives, and they're more productive as a result. So when you feel that you actually have an input into something, you are motivated to get involved. But when you feel your presence is not being acknowledged, why would you be engaged? Why would you just kind of throw your hands in the air and go, what's the point? And it's a form of suicide, really, to have that. It's financially suicidal to have a country full of people who have that awful sense of apathy. And we are known for our apathy. I mean, look at the Greeks. They were going around, wearing T-shirts saying we're not the Irish, which was it was a real insult, because, they were out on the streets demanding certain things and they got them. That's not to say that they're any better off as a result, but they got their loans slashed because they just shouted and got out on the streets and decided they weren't having any more. And here are we keeping our mouths shut because we just feel so apathetic, and we get hammered for every last penny, and yet our politicians just bent over and said we'd pay you whatever you want, So I used to take the superficial kind of example of something I've seen over my lifetime. When I was young, I'm going back nearly 50 years, half a century, Ireland was a very grey place. It was, it was a beautiful country. The people were beautiful. But when I hitchhiked around and I used to go to flower kills and things, the towns and grey. And so somebody came up with the idea of the Tidy Towns competition, and they engaged people in their local communities in terms of the Tidy Towns. And what I've seen, pardon me, over the years is the transformation of most of the towns and villages in Ireland. When I compare it to what it was like, become more colourful. You have flowers, planted in the streets. You have cleaner streets. All these kind of things. Now, if you can do that on a kind of social level, think of how you might be able to transform the country politically if you engage people and involve them.
Yeah, I think engagement is key, and you've hit the nail on the head there, Raymond, because so many people who I would speak to on a regular basis are totally disengaged from any kind of they have no political conscience, and I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but in terms of running the country, it does reduce people to spectators. And if people are not in any way, if they don't have anything to cling to or attach to or to get their teeth stuck into, such as a project like Direct Democracy Ireland, which is essentially the taking back of the power, because power has been hijacked by our pseudo-democratic system which is in place at the moment. I think if people feel that they have a voice and a personal strength and a power, well, then colour is automatically re-injected into the political life of the nation. You've seen that with Switzerland at first hand. Yeah. We're seeing it in Iceland at the moment. And I do think that's possibly why the state-controlled media sees Direct Democracy Ireland as such a threat, because they're part of the establishment, and the establishment doesn't want change. Why would they? They've had it too good for so long. And this is a system of real change there. And engagement is key, as you said.
Absolutely. And I think it's got to come. If you think of the Constitutional Convention, for instance, that was set up by the government to discuss various issues, such as gay marriage and a few other things. There were 8 issues, I think, in total. And they were allowed to raise topics that they felt would be of interest and importance to the people of Ireland. And one of the people brought up for discussion the topic of direct democracy for Ireland, and they had to agree to bring it up and discuss it, and they agreed to bring it up as a subject and discuss it and vote on it. They then voted on it, and they voted 83% in favour of direct democracy for Ireland as a system. Now, you haven't heard anything of that since that was voted on back in, I think it was July last year. or June or July.
Yeah.
That hasn't been covered. But you haven't heard the end of the gay marriage issue. That has been highlighted because this is what the government wants, to distract people from the real problems that we face and the real injustice in this country. Now, I'm not anti-gay, but I think when a country is bankrupt, when there are people dying on trolleys in hospitals, when there are farmers killing themselves and business people killing themselves because their businesses have gone down the Swanee, there are more important issues of life and death to call referendum on, than whether two people who are supposedly in love can get a piece of paper. There are important issues at this moment in time to discuss, and like I said, I'm not against it. It's not good, and it's not a life and death issue. And there are so many life and death issues at the moment affecting people, families breaking up because of the austerity measures that are being imposed in our country, Mm-hmm. So, really, when you look at the 83%, and like the gay marriage issue only got 76% in favour of it, and they call it an overwhelming majority, but the direct democracy issue got 83%. So if that message can be got out to the people of Ireland, I don't see why, the people of Ireland would not embrace this, because it just seems to be a no-brainer, and people are crying out to have a voice. And there are protests every day of the week all over the country in relation to many issues, and no mechanism for these people to stand in the cold and the rain to try to have their voices heard, to try to get some bit of recognition and coverage for issues that are deeply depressing them and devastating them. And it's a very sad state of affairs. And this is not real democracy. This is an excuse for democracy, what we have. And I actually had this conversation with John McGuinness, who was at the time vying for leadership of Fianna Fáil during the coming up to the last election. I'd met with him on a couple of occasions, talked to him about direct democracy. He was very positive, disposed towards it, according to himself, saying the right things. And I met with him on a couple of occasions. He purported to be very supportive of the idea of direct democracy, and I felt I had an ally there. And I was on a radio program, and he was on a phone-in, and along with a professor in UCD, and I was there to talk about direct democracy and explain it, and I did. And then they turned to the professor, and she was a bit wishy-washy about it. She thought it wasn't a bad idea, but with reservations and all this. Then it came to John McGuinness, and John was the same. He was very wishy-washy and reservations, and nothing like the person I'd spoken to face-to-face, who was so supportive and thought it was a great idea and all of this. So I got rather annoyed, and I said, look, we don't have a democracy in this country, And he said, oh, but, you have a vote. And I said, we have a vote, but we have no say. I said, we give our power away to somebody else to talk on our behalf. I said, I don't need somebody to talk on my behalf. I'm quite capable of speaking for myself and making my own decisions, and so are most of the people in the rest of the people in Ireland. And he said, oh, but you get the government that you vote for. And I said, no, hang on a second. I didn't vote for this government. This was the Green Fianna Fáil government, right? Yeah. Of which he was a member. And I said, hang on a second, I didn't vote for this government. I voted for one or two politicians, and that was it. I said, like the rest of the country who voted for one or two politicians. And I said, I didn't vote for this government. And I said, I don't believe many people in the rest of Ireland voted for this government. And then I thought for a second, and I said, hang on a second, did you vote for this government? And there was silence. And I said it again, did you vote for this government? And there was silence. And I said, there's your democracy. There was a man in government, and he couldn't say he'd voted for that government.
And that silence speaks volumes.
That silence spoke for itself.
So what then, Raymond,
there you
would the
go.
role of politicians be within a direct democracy system in an ideal world situation? I mean, there will be politicians, presumably, but what form do they take? What's their role and what do they get up to?
Well, the role isn't too different to what they do now, other than that they're very aware that the people have the last say. They're there to run the country, to act on their promises, and not, as Michael Noonan said, that we expect hyperbole coming up to an election. I don't believe that I certainly don't expect to be lied to coming up to an election. I don't expect exaggeration of the truth, coming up to an election. I want the truth. I want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And the problem with our present system is that not even the opposition knows what's going on. So when they come out with their statements, they're making promises that when they get into government, they may not be able to fulfill because they don't know the reality behind what's going on. Only the secretive few who are in government understand what is going on. And that's no way to run a country. Things have to be open and transparent. You can't have people meeting at 3 o'clock. A few elite, representatives of the people meeting at 3 o'clock in the morning and making decisions above the head of the people that they're there to represent. That is not the way to do it. We would not be in the situation we're in today if we had direct democracy, because the people of Ireland would not have voted to pay back bondholders. And there would have been an open and frank discussion on all of that before something like that was pushed through. And we would not be in the situation we're in today if we were a direct democracy. People meeting in secret, making decisions, forcing through decisions, and it's happened more than once, So, this is not a democracy when you start talking in these terms. So the role of the government is no different to what it is today. They're there to act on their promises and their commitments, and not to exaggerate or lie to the people or make false promises based on nothing, and then go in and just renege on all those things. The role of the government is to get on with the business of doing what they said they would do, and because that's why they were voted in the first place. It doesn't change. But if they're doing anything that is against the will of the people, or that the people don't want or don't agree with, then they have that power to call referendum on that, to have an open and frank discussion about what the government are doing and change it. I mean, if you employ a man to build a house for you, and you tell him that this is what you want, and he makes all kinds of promises and says, oh yeah, and even makes other promises, oh, and I can do this, and I can add that, and I can turn this, and then he starts building your house and doesn't do what he said he was going to do in the first place, or build it the way you wanted it, and he starts making excuses. Surely you have the right to go in and say, sorry, I didn't hire you for that, next.
And I think as well the issue of accountability comes in there, because we have some kind of redress as a consumer if we don't get the product that we pay for or invest in. But when it comes to politics, I mean, fine, we're told we can elect somebody else and somebody new within the same system. But what of the damage done then by the outgoing politicians? So where does accountability come into it? Is it just a case within a direct democracy system that there's a new politician elected and the cycle continues, or is there some kind of real accountability that will presumably prevent people, when I say people I mean politicians, from reverting to type?
Well, first of all, there is a thing called recall, which means that the politician can be taken out if the people decide they want to remove them. That doesn't tend to be exercised because the threat of the politician losing his job tends to be a major, thing for a politician. Yeah. That sense of disgrace and a sense of their wages are suddenly gone, and there's huge ramifications, just personal ramifications, with the person being recalled, and they don't take that very lightly. But with a direct democracy, you have the capacity as a people to make certain demands, and you could demand that if that person had done something serious enough, that they face what do you call it? They face the legal implications of what they've done, and they can be held to account and taken to court and whatever else, which doesn't tend to happen here, you know.
Yeah, so it's not the case that everybody has to wait 5 years and then elect somebody else. It's a totally different system there of recall.
Exactly, and the implications are instantaneous. You know, the ramifications of what they do. It's instant karma, if you like.
Yeah.
You know, you're not waiting for the next lifetime, which people just put. I mean, we all do it. If there was instant karma, there'd be a lot more, you know, self-right, or what would I say, more accountable people around, you know.
Yeah.
It's the fact that things can be put off for so long, and the waters can be muddied and excuses can be made and all of that, that makes for the system being unaccountable. But you see, when you're partners in a political process and the implications of what people do is fairly instantaneous, it does make them sit up and take note. And that's an important, factor. So, you know.
And then, in very broad terms, I'm listening to the radio now, and I'm really liking what I'm hearing. And direct democracy sounds great to me. But how is it going to impact directly on my life? For example, if I vote for a direct democracy politician in the next general election or a local election, whatever it might be, what is that politician going to offer me in terms of the umbrella of direct democracy? What does that mean in terms of stopping the rape of a nation? And for example, let's look at bondholder payments. Nobody in the country wanted that, seemingly, except for the establishment politicians, and that's what's led to absolute financial and economic collapse in Ireland. So what are the micro issues that will affect the man on the street if they vote for a direct democracy politician?
Well, it's like everything. You know, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Does that one step make a difference?
Not always, obviously, but of course it does, in real terms.
Not very obvious. In real terms, it does. You are one step closer to your goal. And if you can maintain that vision and that focus, it sends a very powerful message. If we had a number of people elected in the next local elections, it would suddenly start people waking up and taking notice. And it brings you a long way towards achieving your goal. I mean, Direct Democracy Ireland has already started to change the narrative of Irish politics. You have a number of politicians, of which I spoke to in the past, and who had no interest in the idea of direct democracy, coming out recently since the Meady's by-elections, and having seen themselves hammered in those elections by Direct Democracy Ireland, come out and say, we need direct democracy in Ireland. Joe Higgins is one. On the Pat Kenny show, I almost fell off my chair when I heard it. Came out twice at the end of an interview and said, we need people power in this country. We need direct democracy in Ireland. And I almost fell off my chair. This is a man I spoke to 4 years ago who didn't want to know.
Mm. He's a politician who's held up as an anti-establishment politician. Yeah.
But he didn't want to know. I mean, this is before I got to the point of having registered the party. I was trying to get other parties interested in the concept. And when I realised none of them had any interest, they were all kind of self-serving and self-promoters, I decided, well, it's time to, set up this party myself and push it forward, And since the Meady's by-election, we've had a number. Boyd Barrett is another one who came out and said recently that we need direct democracy at local level government in Ireland. There's words that you would never have heard a few years ago. The words direct democracy. People presume that we have democracy in this country. And suddenly people are waking up to the idea that there is a better type of democracy called direct democracy. And they're starting to use those words now. And people are going, what is that? So we have changed. We've had people, even Eamon Gilmore, coming out and talking about giving people more power at local level politics and stuff like that. Not that I believe that they'll ever really do that. They'll make, sort of superficial, moves in that direction. But at the end of the day, we need this enshrined in our constitution as it was by the founding fathers of this state, so that it can never be removed again, so that our voice is there, enshrined in stone virtually in our constitution. Because any moves and towards doing this on a superficial level by the mainstream politicians means that when the chips are down, or when push comes to shove, they will whip that out from under the people and impose their will, as they always have done. And unless we have it put back in our constitution so it cannot be taken away from us, nothing is going to change. But like I said, we have changed the dialogue, we've changed the narrative, so that politicians are now, talking about this and raising the issue. People are waking up, and the word is getting out there little by little. And as you said, if we get one or two people elected, it will send a very powerful message around the country, that this is something that people want, need, and demand.
And let's look at an ideal world from your point of view situation then, Raymond. Direct Democracy Ireland gets to power, and you've got the majority in the Dáil. Is it a case then that you would continue as a party, but if a direct democracy system is then introduced for all future elections, is it a case that you would remain as a party, or would the fact that the system is in place be enough? Or how would you envisage the future if there was a situation whereby the party came to power?
Well, that's up to the individuals who get in. Again, once our goal is achieved, I won't say we're redundant, but I think there are very idealistic people in Direct Democracy Ireland who would like to represent people and continue on. I can't speak for anybody, myself even, I don't know. It would depend. There are so many things that need to be changed. Even if direct democracy was implemented tomorrow, there are so many things that need to be changed in this country that will be an ongoing process for some time, and so many things that need to be discussed and brought to the attention of people so that they themselves can decide. So it won't be just a question of that's it, our job is done, because there is no, you spoke about an ideal there, an ideal world. There is no ideal world. And as somebody once said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And there is always an ongoing need to make sure that that balance is kept, that nobody tries to come in to pervert it. And it is a never-ending story, if you like, So... but the main thing is that we do have this voice, and we do have it put back into our constitution. That is the first main thing. Now, anybody who feels that they can add to that from the point of view of the Direct Democracy Party, yes, fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with them continuing on, and it depends on what... people have their own ideas of what need to be brought about and implemented, and if they like, if they feel they can make a difference, that many of them will continue to on with the party. But the main goal is to have this just reinstated in the constitution.
Yeah, and I think that was very important just to clarify that, because so many people have become so disillusioned with party politics and the system that exists at the moment. So the goal is a changing of the system as opposed to, a new party who wants to come to power.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And, the main thing that happens is that once direct democracy is back in the constitution, the party... is no longer the dictatorial institution, that it was, and the whole political scene is no longer dictatorial. So Direct Democracy Ireland will be subject to the will of the people just as much as every other party will be.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. That's the checks and balances system that doesn't currently exist.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
And I like the use and continual use of the word power. It's a word that we use a lot on Alchemy Radio, and I think the key crux of things here is that people need to claim back their own power, to step up and take some personal responsibility for that erosion of power and to take it back. Because if you look at the pure numbers involved, how many politicians? There's 165 odd politicians in the major house, the Dáil in Ireland, and we have 4 million people. If we don't have some system whereby we can be the ones with the power as opposed to the politicians being the ones with the power, well, we really do deserve whatever we get, in my opinion. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. First of all, we are a damaged people. We have been subjected to, a long period of time of being dictated to, starting with the Brits and continued on by our own politicians who, as soon as we got our freedom, took away our voice, to have a say. And have continued with this, joke of democracy where they lie to you to get into power and then just get on and do their own thing for the next 5 years and play this merry-go-round between them. I mean, these are people who are quite friendly, who have this sham theatre of opposition, and then go and have drinks and slap each other on the back, in the Dáil bar afterwards. It's a boys' club. It's a merry-go-round, and that whole thing needs to be broken up. And the problem is that people have been kind of sleepwalked, if you like, into this sense of apathy, and it's almost an illness at this stage. It is an illness where when people become depressed and beaten and humiliated, they almost need therapy as a country. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's you can't blame somebody who has been terrorized and abused as a child, if you like. So as a child state, as a childlike state, new state back in 1920s, the abuse continued. And we know it continued on so many levels, not just from the church institutions, but politically as well. We are a people who have been abused unmercifully over the decades. And that has become institutionalized in our national psyche. So we are a people who are not free. We are the result of massive abuse and a kind of mental illness, in a sense. And we see the effects of it all around us every day of the week: alcoholism, drug abuse, all of this kind of thing. And the inability to stand up and mobilize ourselves as a nation, where the Greeks, as I said earlier, were out on the streets and going, "We're not the Irish," And it's obvious to anybody looking in from the outside that we are subjugated people and are still being subjugated, to the extent that it is virtually a mental illness at this stage. And we have to come out of that. We have to it's going to be a bit of a learning curve, and we will have to go through finding ourselves, as a people, little by little, gradually bringing ourselves out of this. We are seriously demented people right now, So I don't believe we deserve what we get, in the sense, any more than a person who has been terrorized and abused deserves, the criticism for not being able to deal with certain situations. And you see it with people who have been abused, for instance, or who had alcoholic fathers and who pick spouses who are alcoholic. It's on a subconscious level. We don't do it intentionally. So you can't say you deserve something if it's not something that you do consciously or, you're aware of. And it's a form of mental illness. And as I said, we've had institutional abuse for so long, and, political and institutional abuse as a nation. And been terrorized by the Catholic Church and by our politicians and all of this, that we can't think in a free sort of way, and it's only gradually we're becoming aware. There is a point where people, sometimes the abused people do become aware and start to come to grips with their illness or with their phobias or whatever it is. And we as a nation need to wake up to that gradually, and it won't happen overnight, but it will happen. And hopefully we have started in Direct Democracy Ireland that process of waking people up to the need to engage, and the fact that there is the possibility of a mechanism being put in place where we can have more open dialogue, hold our politicians accountable, and all of these things for the abuse and all of the things that they foster on us, on a daily basis. And we have to wake up for that. And not necessarily looking for revenge or anything like that, but we have to become realistic in how we engage with that system, with that political system, and come to some sort of resolution, if you like. Maybe a psychiatrist would put it more succinctly than me, but we are a damaged people, and it's like I said, our rehabilitation is going to take a little bit of time.
I think
it won't happen overnight.
In terms of the future and how encouraged you are in terms of the response that you've got to it from the public as opposed to the media, how do you see Direct Democracy Ireland advancing, and how do you see the future for you as a party, or even aside from the party, for this idea, this political system?
No, I've great hope for it, because most people we talk to seem to get it. And I mean 90% or 95% of people that we talk to go, yeah, we'd like some of that. And what frustrates them a little bit is that as a party, we're not as organised as we should be or might be. We are, a lot of us, unemployed. And finding it hard just to survive on a day-to-day basis, and trying to do this as well on the side. We don't have any finances. Like I said, we're not career politicians. We're competing with parties who are virtually 100 years in existence, who have vast financial resources, massive contacts, big machinery, political machinery built up over the years in place, and we are a fledgling party. And people continually, some of them, compare us to these parties, and we're only a year in existence. And yet we have performed, in a way, minor miracles in that time. In the Meath by-election, the result that we got for a totally unknown party, and also in, like as I said earlier, changing the narrative of Irish politics, where politicians, with the words direct democracy, you hear it every now and again, which you wouldn't have heard before, and the talk about giving people more power. So, we are having an impact, and I believe in time that recognition will just grow. It can only just grow, and hopefully at some point we will get people contributing some financial support to us that we can put to good use. And the few euro that we had, and it was minuscule by comparison to what the other parties put into the Meath by-elections, those small resources we had were put to great use, and we will continue to do that with any resources that we get that come in. So I have great hopes for the future with the impact that we've had, and the growth and recognition of direct democracy.
And how can people get further involved, Raymond? Tell us about the website and how people can find out more information.
Well, our website is directdemocracy.ie. It's quite straightforward. Directdemocracy.ie, and we have a Facebook page as well under Direct Democracy Ireland, which is the name of the party, Direct Democracy Ireland. So they're the two areas, and you can contact the the head office, or there's phone numbers there that for people to contact, or they can contact me if they want on 089 40 11178. If they want to know more or be directed to various places. But you will hear more of us coming up to the local elections and the European elections. So myself and Ben Gilroy and Jan van de Ven, who's the recently elected leader of the party, will have a good online presence coming up to those elections. So, the people will hear more of us shortly.
Well, we'll be keenly watching proceedings, and I'll be fascinated to see how things go. And the best of luck with that, Raymond. I have the power, you have the power, we have the power. Raymond Whitehead, it's been fantastic speaking to you on Alchemy Radio today. Thank you for joining me.
No problem. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And so for anybody listening who might be based in Ireland and is interested in finding out more about Direct Democracy Ireland, a talk will be taking place on the 13th of March. That's Thursday the 13th of March in the town of Carlow, which is about 80 kilometres south of Dublin. The venue is the Seven Oaks Hotel and it kicks off at 7:30 p.m.
Alchemy Radio.